Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Engineer Sook. Today we will go over the process of EIT to professional engineer. As discussed in my last video, we will go over the work experience reporting process. I will provide tips and real life competency examples. Do you guys know how to meet the Canadian environmental competency requirements? You don't need to be inside Canada to meet these competencies. Stay tuned for the full video. We will cover more on this topic. So today we are going over the work experience reporting process, and on this slide we have listed like what we will be covering in this video. So first is the information required before you start the work experience reporting, the details that you need before you start the process. Second is the validator requirements, what kind of validators you will need. Third is the engineering experience that is eligible. We will go over that. And fourth is the type of competencies. There are various types of competencies and categories that we will go over. And fifth is the tips on writing competency examples. We will provide you some real life tips that you can use to write your examples. And next, sixth is the Canadian environment competencies. That for most of the international applicants, you need to write those Canadian environment competencies, even though you have met your 4-year work experience requirements. And the last one is the academic review cases. On this slide, we're going to discuss the information required for the work experience reporting process. So first you would need the details from your employment history. You will need the job position and the title that you hold at your company, the name of your employer, start and end date of your employment day, and the contacts of your colleagues and managers as well as clients, whoever you have dealt with at your role. Next comes your work experience. This will include the projects and non-project activities that you would have accomplished at each job. I will highly suggest that you write down a Word document with detailing all the projects and even the non-projects that you have dealt at your job, and create a database that will be immensely helpful while writing the competency examples. Next, to start writing your competency examples, you will need to identify the validators. So from the contact list of your colleagues, managers or clients, you have to make sure you choose the validators that can validate your experience. Make sure you contact them before you select them as validators, and make sure they are willing to validate your experience. On this slide, I'm going to discuss the validator requirements. So who are validators? They are the people or the person that will confirm the work experience information of which they have personal knowledge. So they could be your supervisors, your managers, your clients, or your colleagues who would have worked on the similar projects while you were working at that employment. Next comes they provide independent competence level ratings for your competencies that are assigned to them. So if you send out some competencies to them for validation, they will assign the ratings. Validators also provide overall feedback on the applicant's readiness for professional registration. So they will be asked questions on your English language competencies like reading, speaking, listening, and writing, as well as other character requirements, and they will have to provide their comments or answers on that as well. Usually you will need minimum of 4 validators to meet your experience requirements, with at least 2 of them being professional engineers or equivalent. So why 4 validators? Because they have to validate 4 years of engineering experience before you become a professional engineer. So usually it's recommended that you have 4 of them, and they will verify your employment history for 4 years. And professional engineers, if you are in a country where they're available, then you should verify your experience from them. It's highly recommended. But if not, then you can try without those. But usually you need to have some kind of certification or attestation that they are a qualified engineer in that country. That's really helpful. Next, continuing on to the validator requirements, there are three types of validators. So one, they are divided into different types. So one is competency validators. They have first-hand knowledge of the competency examples, and they are usually an experienced engineer, typically a supervisor, colleague, or a client. And next is professional reference validators, and they are a Canadian licensed professional engineer. They could provide competency validations or just employment history validations. So these are two different things. Competency validation could be just the individual competency, and employment history is if you haven't used any competency from that employment, they can just verify the employment history that this person has worked with them. Next is the employment history validators. They validate the employment history if you have not written any competency examples from that job. Then they will verify that you have worked in that role and provide overall validation for that experience. They could be colleague, HR manager, or owner of a company. So the employment history validators don't specifically needs to be an engineer, but engineers are preferred because it's an engineering work experience, and they are preferred. But yeah, if not available, you can use HR manager or any other competent person that can validate that this person has worked at this job from this state to this state and provide some overall competency rating on your work experience. So on this slide, we will discuss the eligible work experience. So what is considered as eligible for work experience reporting? So any engineering work experience of your bachelor's degree is acceptable for for professional engineer. So that's acceptable. Full-time engineering or geoscience experience is counted based on the number of months of experience you have, and if experience was less than full-time, then you must indicate the percentage in the overview box. So sometimes you are doing a part-time job or a part-time teaching assistant job, then you should represent the amount of hours or in a percentage, like it was 50% or 20% based on like 10 hours in a week, considering 40 full hours in a week. That's how you will calculate the percentage. Next comes the pre-graduation experience. This is like when you're doing your bachelor's. So 1 year maximum can be counted from any experience that you have before you have completed your bachelor's of engineering degree. So, but that experience must be after second year of your engineering degree. So you must have completed 2 years of your engineering education, and that experience could qualify into your 4-year requirement, and maximum allowed is 1 year. Next comes the master's degree in engineering. So if you have completed thesis-based master's, then you can count 1 year of experience towards your professional engineering designation. If you have completed PhD in engineering, 2 years of maximum can be counted if the PhD program was entered directly after a bachelor's program. But if you have already counted 1 year of experience for a master's, thesis-based master's, then you can only count 1 year experience for PhD. On this slide, we're going to discuss the type of competencies. For engineering, there are 7 categories of competencies. And first is the technical competence, second is the communication, third is the project and financial management, fourth is the team effectiveness, fifth is the professional accountability, sixth is the social, economic, environmental, and sustainability, seventh is the personal, continuing professional development. Each of these categories are subdivided into individual competencies with a combined total of 34 competencies. You have to qualify all these 34 competencies to become a professional engineer. So on this slide, we are discussing some tips on writing competency examples. So make sure the level of complexity of the project is clear to the reader. Details on the project size, such as dollar value and duration, are helpful for assessor and validators to validate your competencies. Next, clearly identify your role in the project. What was your level of responsibility and how did you contribute to the outcomes? Next is also provide sufficient detail to demonstrate how the example relates to engineering work. If the example does not clearly relate to engineering work, it will receive a rating of 0. So for technical competency categories, you must demonstrate how you applied engineering, science, and geoscience principles in that example. So now we're going to discuss how to write a competency example. And here is an example that's like not well written. So this is part of a technical competence and it will be demonstrate knowledge of regulations, code standards and safety. Now the situation here is building a warehouse and action is written is I was part of a team building the structure. We did plan the building structure and other engineering requirements. Bill of material was prepared and the fabricator used it to order the parts of the structure. The building complied with all the local codes and regulations. Outcome is mentioned the building was completed in 8 months time under budget and schedule due to the teamwork. The building passed all the regulatory inspections. And so you can see this example is very generic right from the start. Like in the situation he has just mentioned building a warehouse. He hasn't mentioned the size or the details of the warehouse. It could have been a 10 feet by 20 feet size building, or it could have been 100 feet by 200 feet building. So that detail is missing. Also, he could have added the financial or the budget details of the project, like it's a $5 million project or a $2 million warehouse. How much amount? It could be in any currency, but you should mention those, and also the length of the project, like the timelines. You have to complete it in 8 months, 1 year, 2 year, how long it ran. And then if you evaluate the action part of this, he has just mentioned that he was part of a team building the structure. So as you know, there are in some organization there could be multiple engineers and each engineer would have a different role. Like civil engineer, he can be doing inspection work, earthworks, or he could be on the design side of things where he's just designing and doing structural analysis as well as drawing how the structure will look like. And there could be another engineer whose job is making regulatory sure the regulatory compliance, ensure the permit application is the drawings are covering those and meeting all those regulatory requirements. And so that's why it's very critical to specify your exact role in that team. So team is big for any project of this size, so please mention your specific role in that team. Next comes the now if you say we did plan the building structure, you don't need to write in you need to be writing in first person and just mentioning yourself in that, and you need to specify what kind of engineering requirements you were dealing with. Like, was it structural, was it grading requirements, earthworks, the foundation, the roof, what kind of requirements you were dealing with. So there are those little things will add value. And also in this you can see there's no mention of what kind of code they were referring to, the regulation they were referring to. There are multiple codes in there, like could be ISO codes, there could be national building codes, there could be ASHRAE for heating and cooling of the building. And so you need to be specific what codes and what regulations. So there could be guidelines from local municipality on the city for the regulations. So so make sure you capture all those details in these competencies. Next, now I will show you a competency. Here you can see a well-written competency example. So same example as discussed in the last slide, but you can see the difference. The situation is building a warehouse of 100 by 300 feet size with a budget of $5 million. Action, As mentioned, I was part of a team building the warehouse. I was the civil engineering lead on this project. I made sure the building complied with the National Building Code, and I made sure the building was designed to withstand 150 km/h winds and a snow load of 30 psf. Also made sure the structure met the local municipal requirements. I reviewed and submitted the permit request as per the city permit requirements. Outcome, the building permit was approved. I made sure that all the building requirements were executed during the construction phase of the warehouse. So you can see this example clearly the difference between the last one and this. There are very specific details that you learned during this project and you executed, like the the wind speed that the building can take, and the snow load, and what regulations and the codes you referred. So all those are captured in this example. So this is a nicely well written example. This is the way you should target your examples. Here we're going to discuss the Canadian environmental competencies. So usually these are required for international applicants. So engineering applicants are required to demonstrate the following 8 competencies in a Canadian or equivalent to Canadian work environment. So for all the international applicants, if they have 4 years of experience outside country, that's acceptable, but you still have to meet these competencies that are equivalent to Canadian work environment, and you have to justify these if you want to claim your international experience for the PH purposes. And so these are like 1.1, 1.6, 1.9, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 5.1, and 6.2. All these competencies you can find on the I'll provide a document where you can read about these individual competencies, and each of these competencies must be passed with the rating of the applicable category average. So like for technical competence category, like we've discussed, the average or the minimum rating is 3. So out of a 5 scale, it's a 3 rating that you need in total average for those category. And similarly for other categories, there will be averages that you require. So you can find that in the document attached below in the link. This could be experience obtained outside Canada, but have referred or worked with the Canadian standards and regulations. So even though it's an international work experience, but you in that experience you have used similar codes that are used in Canada. So that could be sometimes ASME codes like American Society of Mechanical Engineers codes like B31, pressure vessel codes, or boiler and pressure vessel codes, the piping codes. So those codes also, because these are applicable in internationally as well, so you can mention those codes. There are other codes as well, like from American Society of Testing Materials and ISO standards that sometimes are used in Canada too. The building standards, you can refer to those if they are. You have to see if those are used in Canada as well, and then you can justify if you have used those in your past work experience. Even though that experience was in a foreign country, you can claim those as an Canadian experience. So in this slide, we're going to discuss the academic review cases. So usually these are applicable to international applicants, and this applies to international graduates who have obtained their bachelor's degree outside Canada and are not yet approved as engineer training. This section does not apply to you if you're already registered as an engineer training. For engineering training applicants, only competency category 1 technical competency category will be assessed. If category 1 is passed, the confirmatory exams will be waived and the applicant will be approved as an engineering training. If after 3 submissions, the initial one and the 2 plus 2 resubmissions, category 1 has not been passed, then the applicant must write the exams. And the validators for these competencies could be a supervisor, colleagues, or client. They don't need to be professional validators. So anybody who is from those category can be validator, like a supervisor, colleague, or client who has engineering experience. So That's the case here. And also, this doesn't mean that your work experience reporting has been met. It's just those categories may be waived, but yeah, you may have to write these competencies again when you submit your application for PH. But yeah, similar process applies to these technical competence categories as well, when even though you're writing for academic review cases. So this video will be helpful for doing those competencies. Thank you for watching my video. Stay tuned for more videos. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Until next time, happy engineering.